Today in Ukraine, we're discussing the following. Negotiations between Russia and Ukraine have now concluded. Have they managed to find any common ground or compromise? The Russians massively shelled Ukrainian territory directly during the negotiation round. Ukraine's foreign minister called these missiles that hit the negotiation table. Speaking of missiles, the Russians are running out of them. The occupiers are forced to strike Ukraine with experimental weaponry and missiles that have only just come off the production line. The Russian Federation is also facing problems with oil extraction. Its production has fallen in Russia to a 16-year low, and from this point forward, things will only get worse. Meanwhile, Russian spies began to inform on their own colleagues. These anonymous reports are, without exaggeration, shocking. Hello, my name is Eva Nikolashvili, and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, like the video, and let's get to the news. Negotiations held in Abu Dhabi between Ukraine and Russia, with the United States acting as a mediator, have now concluded. These discussions commenced on Friday and then continued throughout the day on Saturday. According to Rustem Umerov, the Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, the meeting focused on the specific parameters for bringing an end to the war and the subsequent logical steps for the negotiation process. Before the commencement of peace talks, Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov announced that the Kremlin is demanding the complete withdrawal of Ukrainian military personnel from the Donbas region. According to the Russian dictator's spokesman, this is allegedly a crucial precondition for any negotiations aimed at ending the war. Regarding the outcomes of the negotiations, there is currently no official information available. Meanwhile, Western media outlets are reporting that the talks were successful and constructive. However, as Reuters reports, there were no signs of compromise whatsoever at Friday's meeting. The United States and Russia continue to exert pressure on Ukraine to concede Donbas. The Russians themselves do nothing but engage in hypocrisy. Russian forces launched a massive attack on the territory of Ukraine at the very moment when negotiations were taking place in the United Arab Emirates. His missiles hit not only Ukrainians, but the negotiating table. Ukraine's foreign minister Andriy Sybiha commented on Russia's massive night attack. According to Sybiha, for Ukrainians, it was another night of Russian terror. It's cynical that Vladimir Putin gave the order for a massive missile strike just as delegations gathered in Abu Dhabi to discuss the peace process under U.S. auspices. The strike, the foreign minister emphasized, was directed not only against the civilian population, but also against the very idea of negotiations. During the attack, dozens of ballistic missiles, along with hundreds of drones, struck across Ukraine. Kyiv and Kharkiv were shaken by powerful explosions. Once again, the primary targets were energy infrastructure facilities and residential areas. Here's our report on what's happening on the front and around it at this very moment.
This is how Ukrainian drones are working in the village of Rejection, a part Pokrovsk district. But the enemy, in small groups, attempts to breach our defenses, but strike UAVs prevent them from succeeding. Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad remain the hottest spots on the front line. In the past day, 92 of the 222 clashes occurred precisely in these directions. To occupy as quickly as possible the settlements and villages around Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad, Russian invaders have transferred additional forces to this front-line sector. Particular emphasis is being placed on drone operator teams.
The Russian orcs are banking on increasing their drone operator teams, but these planned increases are in fact becoming significant decreases thanks to our dedicated hunters of these crews who quietly and imperceptibly eliminate them recently in quite unexpected and interesting locations.
A Ukrainian fighter with the call sign Machnoy reports that in the Pokrovsk direction, the AFU cleared the southern flank of Pokrovsk and dislodged the occupation forces from their positions.
During the operation, we took prisoners. Several Russians were neutralized, diminishing the enemy's combat strength. This sector is now firmly under our control. The enemy has no presence there, and for now they are unable to quickly recover, according to the military. As for Suketsky, the situation holds no surprises. The settlement remains under our control, just as it was. South of it, the gray zone has somewhat receded, but for now this is more a tactical fluctuation than a change in the area's role. However, this sector will not be an easy one. The enemy is trying to push, seeking out weak points, so the tension there will certainly remain.
The invaders are failing in Pokrovsk, so they're attempting to surround it. Right now, the most intense fighting is in Rejection village. The invaders are trying to get in there at all costs.
The enemy, besides their objective to completely capture the city's northern section, as we can observe from the expansion of the red zone, they are now moving around this northern area and have in recent times focused their efforts on Hrishin. They know and understand how crucial this settlement is. Our pilots are operating from there, and our logistics pass through this point, and generally all the work being carried out in the direction of Mirnohrad and Pokrovsk is also concentrated within the Hrishin area.
The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oldo Siskinema, Sipona Kistano Alexander Shusky, Polasti Pomapipo Siki, also visited this sector. He stated that the Ukrainian armed forces are successfully containing the adversary, who is attempting to infiltrate Mirnohrad and Pokrovsk with small groups.
In Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad, Ukraine's defense forces continue to repel the enemy, who in small groups tries to infiltrate the northern districts of both cities. Due to active assault operations, another enemy attempt to seize these settlements was thwarted. The deployed operational reserve of the occupiers sustained significant losses. However, the situation remains complex.
Alexander Sishki, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine,
He hears a video of the clearing operation in Kupyansk, Kharkiv Oblast. The Kartia strike group continues to push out Russian invaders remaining in the city center. In the Kupyansk sector, our defenders have successfully occupied dominant heights, which significantly complicates any attempts by the enemy to develop their offensive operations. Maintaining control over the approaches to these settlements allows Ukrainian forces to effectively manage the overall situation. Despite the high level of tension that persists, in Kupyansk itself, AFU soldiers continue their efforts to clear the city of occupiers. There, the vast majority of enemy soldiers are concentrated in one block.
The main bulk of the enemy forces is concentrated in the city center, specifically within a single block of multi-story buildings, so the current objective is to complete the clearing operation of this very block, and ideally without any casualties on the part of Ukrainian soldiers. As you can even see on the map, all Russian attempts to regain their position and somehow reach the city to restore land communication, well, it's not there, and there's no success here, nor will there be. And pressure east of the city doesn't lead them to it either. This means these people won't receive reinforcements.
Occupying forces are attempting to take control of Kupyansk, but this particular objective is made more difficult for them due to the significant losses in manpower and equipment.
Anna Timofeeva, Russia is experiencing a shortage of ammunition. This is confirmed by the latest massive attack. As reported by Vladislav Vlasyuk, the president of Ukraine's Commissioner for Sanctions Policy, this week, particularly last night, Russia used several types of missile weaponry for its attack on Ukraine, including new and experimental models. Specifically, the Russian Federation launched Zircon missiles at Ukrainian territory, for which their deployment against ground targets is considered unusual. The KH-101, these are missiles that the Russians frequently employ, however, on this occasion. For the strike, missiles manufactured in 2026 were utilized, which could potentially indicate the involvement of their absolute newest production batches. The KH-32s are modernized cruise missiles specifically developed from the older KH-22 platform, and this marks the very first documented instance of their use against the city of Kyiv, as well as the RM-40AU ballistic missiles, which were launched from S-400 air defense systems. These particular missiles were reportedly created using training target missiles as their fundamental basis, a fact that may strongly suggest a significant deficit of specialized offensive strike munitions. The Tamaneftegaz oil terminal in Russia's Krasnodar Krai, an oil depot and a thermal power plant in Ponza, and all of this has happened just in the last 24 hours. We'll discuss the consequences of these so-called good drones at work and how instant karma is now catching up with Russians for their attacks on Ukraine, all of that and more. Coming up next in our report.
Svetlana Sirotuk, Belziage, Russian Penza. As a result of drone operations, the oil depot so to speak, as IJAK is leaving the chat. Later, local authorities will confirm the drone attack and report on the fire at the oil depot. Shambel Titek.
This is the first point. The oil depot in Penza, which, as far as I understand, is not just an ordinary oil depot. It actually carries within itself, one might say, a very specific and important function of a strategic object, in the sense that this particular oil depot is actively utilized by both the Russian army and consequently, that provides the logistics for movement directly and within the region itself, among other things. Isn't that right? The region, which once again, like all of Russia, is now working for the front. So a disruption of this logistics will lead to corresponding problems.
In addition, it is preliminarily known that the local thermal power plant was also under drone attack.
Enrique, well, there's a significant nuance here because, according to my information, there were strikes and also at the Penza TPP. So the TPP, we are talking about those specific strikes that the defense forces continue to carry out against the energy infrastructure of the Russian Federation. Why are these facilities, in my opinion, legitimate military targets? First and foremost, we must discuss this because this so-called switch, if we were to turn it off, then the deactivation of such a switch would consequently impact the production and capabilities of the military-industrial complex.
Svetlana Sirotyuk. It was also reported that in the Voronezh region, a residential building caught fire due to Russian air defense operations, which for Russian air defense must now be considered commonplace. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed the air defense activity in the Voronezh region, but did not mention the consequences of this operation.
Enrique, well, when it comes to the protection of these kinds of facilities, we know that Russian air defense systems, must, first and very importantly, pose a direct threat to the local population, because we very often witness how Russian air defense systems launch their missiles and then hit their own homes.
Svetlana Sirotyuk. Meanwhile, SBU drones successfully struck the Taman Neftegaz oil terminal in Russian Federation's Krasnodar Krai. And Taman Neftegaz is a facility, it's important to note, truly extraordinary.
Enrique, well, we are discussing the provisioning of the Black Sea Fleet, no matter how much it has been curtailed by our defense forces today. Unfortunately, missile carriers still remain in Novorossiysk, specifically, don't they? And these vessels, consequently, are in need of fuel. Accordingly, they might not receive enough of this fuel. This means a reduction in the number of combat missions, for example. Consequently, this affects the supply of Russian troops in the south, the southern grouping of forces. This directly impacts the front line. That's why we're seeing these kinds of strikes, and what's more, it's also a disruption of the entire production cycle. It's not just the destruction of a fuel depot, which in itself is quite a sight when it's burning, but we're talking about disabling, among other things, unique equipment that Russia simply cannot repair or replace these issues in a timely manner today. This means that for this equipment, significant time is also needed to install new components. I have serious doubts that the Russian Federation today is ready to replenish these losses after such strikes very quickly.
And such strikes have now become a regular occurrence for Russia, which is clearly struggling to cope with the Ukrainian drone assaults, although attempts, of course, have been there. Yes, and success have been made.
Vladislav Filonenko. In Russia, oil refineries have begun to be covered with metal protective structures and nets.
But the so-called spiderweb nets didn't become a panacea.
Russia has begun recruiting volunteers to protect their oil refineries from drone attacks.
In short, while the AFU increases the number of strikes and hones their accuracy and effectiveness, Russia frantically tries to come up with a solution to combat Ukrainian drones. But so far, as we can see, without success, because makeshift nets, volunteer groups, and air defense that targets residential buildings can hardly be called effective means of combating drones.
Eleonora Borda, oil production in Russia fell to a 16-year low. Russia's oil output, according to 2025 figures, amounted to 512 million tons, Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak reported in an article for Energy Policy Journal. Oil production, as per Novak's data, declined for the third consecutive year. More on the collapse of the oil pseudo-empire.
Slowly but surely, Putin's oil-fueled prosperity is now rolling towards its ultimate demise. Oil production in Russia has fallen to its lowest level in the past 16 years.
There are unofficial indicators, and no one disputes them.
The fall in oil output is a direct result of US sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil, which have severely impacted exports to India and China.
Even back in November, the average price for Russian oil was $44 per barrel. This is a very painful and quite unpleasant figure for Russia. The simple reason for this is that in economics, there is a concept known as the cost of production. So that what you've spent just then to extract a barrel of oil, and accordingly, if the price is higher than these costs, you make a profit. If the price falls below that figure, you don't earn anything. Well, in November, the price was 44, but the production cost was estimated at 45.
It was already lower in November.
To cover the deficit, the Ministry of Finance will have to withdraw about 3 trillion rubles from the National Welfare Fund. Another 700 billion will go towards investment expenses. As a result, only 400 billion rubles will remain in the fund. Amacum sostenendo say an amount capable of covering just 3 to 4 days of federal budget expenditures.
So, Russia's budget was calculated more precisely. The budget's revenues and the figure of $56. No, 59, I apologize, dollars per barrel. But in reality, the actual figure is not just 50, but already below $40 per barrel. Consequently, Russia is experiencing a terrible shortfall in these oil and gas revenues. These revenues were the very foundation of their budget.
According to Reuters, the Bank of Russia back in February last year prepared a report for the government in which it directly warned of a possible recurrence of a prolonged oil price collapse, similar to what in the 1980s became one of the factors in the collapse of the Soviet Union. Dapichish Dali.
Oil for Russia, what I've been saying, it's just like oil for the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union was making money from oil, everything was great. The Soviet Union started a war in Afghanistan. When the Soviet Union, partly due to pressure from the United States, which drove down oil prices, essentially put its own future into question. And as history showed, the Soviet Union collapsed precisely because of this fact.
Now Russia is in the same situation.
The oil and gas sector provides a third of budget revenues, a third of all investments in the country, and 2/3 of the economy's foreign exchange earnings. For decades, high oil prices allowed the Kremlin to soften the impact of economic downturns. But now the situation is different. For Russia, the world's second largest exporter, oil has become a vulnerable point.
In Russia, the situation is that American technologies available until 2022 are now almost exhausted, and global oil prices are consequently falling. As a result, they can't earn money. Unable to make money, they must scale back production because it won't be profitable. Any businessman, first and foremost, thinks about how to at least cover his costs. And if that's not possible, then here's your answer why oil production is falling in Russia.
Traditional methods for generating income are steadily decreasing while our expenditures remain constant.
The federal regions are being underfunded. Yes, Moscow receives funds and St. Petersburg does too. But other federal regions are not so fortunate. And this creates preconditions for, let's say, separatist sentiments among local elites. Russia doesn't care about its population. They've somehow grown accustomed to neglecting them. Local elites, however, are those who can cause significant problems. And now seeing global oil prices fall and oil production decline, consequently, less money is flowing into the budget, and many regions, I believe, are already carefully planning, what if there's no longer a single central authority?
Putin's regime is becoming weaker with every passing day. It is exhausting its available resources and losing significant support from within Russia.
Germany and Italy have rejected Trump's proposal. Both nations declined to join the so-called Peace Council. According to German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, he had informed the American president several weeks ago that he would be prepared to join the organization, provided it, as originally planned and envisioned, would oversee the adherence to peace agreements within the Gaza Strip. However, in the form in which Trump is currently planning this body, Germany cannot accept, at the very least, even just its governance structures. This is due in part to reasons of German constitutional law, Merz explained. The Chancellor also stated that Germany is prepared to explore new forms of cooperation with the United States if it involves seeking new formats that will bring peace closer in various regions, not just in the Gaza Strip, but also in Ukraine. Giorgia Meloni also put forward the same reasons for not joining. The Italian Prime Minister stated that the organization's charter is also incompatible with Italy's legal system, a fact which the head of government in Rome has already communicated to the US president. Meanwhile, Meloni expressed hope that these issues could be resolved, after which Italy would be ready to reconsider the invitation to participate in this peace council. Russian spies are informing on each other. Journalists have obtained anonymous reports which employees of the Foreign Intelligence Service are writing about their own colleagues' prostitution, corruption, alcoholism, in a word, you name it, it's all there. More on these snitching spies coming up.
The Russian Foreign Intelligence Service is the foundation of the Kremlin regime abroad. Its employees work at embassies.
Their task is espionage, agent recruitment, and sabotage. For Putin, the SVR headquarters in Yasenevo, better known as the Forest, is a true haven. This video contains rare footage, shot in 2016, 2 years after the start of Russia's hybrid aggression against Ukraine. Deputed then, Putin himself arrived to personally introduce the new director, Naryshkin. A correspondent reports that Russia's president, inside the SVR building, feels completely at ease.
Now the new fifth SVR director, Sergei Naryshkin, joins them. They will go inside. And did you notice anything unusual? Contrary to routine practice, no presidential protocol officers are seen in the frame. But here in Yasenevo, Putin himself knows exactly what's what from his old job.
Russian propaganda describes the special service as an elite with which nothing can compare. The dictator himself also praises his own.
They devote their entire lives to their homeland. They sacrifice much and give up so many things.
But they give up in the name of the most important, serving the fatherland.
SDR officers are actually greedy for corruption, prostitutes, and alcohol. They get into positions and are promoted through lies and bribery. But thanks to their special service ID, they consistently avoid accountability. Moreover, intelligence officers are prone to informing. They report not only on surveillance targets, but also on each other. Hackers gained access to some official memos, which shed more light on the personnel of Russia's agents. Here, for example, is a complaint addressed to Herman Bykov, the deputy head of the Illegal Intelligence Department, after the death of his drug-addicted daughter, who, as a colleague clarifies, committed suicide. The father began to take out his anger on his colleagues. He sends his own people on lucrative assignments and foreign trips, and as a thank you, he accepts alcohol as gifts.
In the unit, there's an established practice where group commanders, upon returning from their assignments, are obligated to bring expensive alcoholic beverages for the leadership. The quantity and quality of these gifts differ based on the country they've been stationed in. From some countries, the value starts at $50 per bottle, while from more lucrative or highly paid countries, it's at least $100 per bottle.
Bykov, known for his fondness for gifts, once even dispatched an employee on an overseas mission, despite the fact that this individual had received a negative psychological evaluation. While abroad, all intelligence officers are seconded to embassies. The man tragically took his own life with his standard issue firearm right within the embassy premises. Furthermore, in another formal complaint addressed to Naryshkin, there are grievances lodged against SVR Captain Sergei Zaitsev, a member of the Zaslon Special Operations Unit.
The official name is the 7th Department of the SVR's Internal Security Center. The unit is classified. For this reason, public information about it is, with rare exceptions, unavailable. The unit's operatives provide force support for SVR Russia's operations abroad. Furthermore, the unit's operatives act autonomously and are not required to coordinate their actions with other agencies.
But to get into this mega secret and much praised barrier, it turns out is not all that difficult.
SVR Captain Sergei Zaitsev takes 30,000 rubles from Rosgvardia soldiers for allegedly successful completion of a medical examination and for promising to employ them in the special unit Zaslon. In addition, Zaitsev illegally receives a salary bonus for the title of Master of Sports in Kickboxing, although he is not one. By decision of the Association's Council, the swindler was deprived of the right to wear the maroon beret and was obliged to surrender his ID. However, he refused.
Zaitsev still appears at events in his maroon beret. For Russian intelligence officers, honor and law are conditional concepts. Abroad, spies and their uniformed diplomat colleagues often flout rules, and due to their disgraceful behavior, they frequently get into trouble and become local media sensations. For example, in these frames, the first secretary of the Russian embassy in Moldova is having fun.
Could you please tell me about him? And what exactly is this?
Would you be able to tell me, please?
What's the film? What is it you're doing now?
No, you nearly ran over our comrade.
Right now, specifically just now. And where is your flashing light? Just now the flashing light was on. Where's the flasher?
There was nothing.
How come nothing?
You drunk, huh?
Who are you? Please introduce yourself.
And similar reports by SDRs on their colleagues have become a practice.
a career officer of Military Unit 33949, and an advisor to the KS ambassador, along with a representative of Rosuboron Export with EP, frequent restaurants and drive while intoxicated. This could lead to traffic accidents and severe negative consequences for our country's image. While deployed to their actual combat posts, these particular officers repeatedly established acquaintances with dubious individuals and engaged in sexual liaisons with prostitutes, a fact of which the ambassador is perfectly well informed.
Embassy and special service cars abroad are driven not only by spies, but also by their family members.
Despite their considerable wealth and personal luxury cars, these spies still send their wives to markets and boutiques in vehicles with disguised license plates. And of course, they're not immune to the favorite sin of Russian officials and military personnel. These intelligence officers are eagerly exploiting yet another golden vein. They secure lucrative state contracts for their companies, especially within the construction sector.
Warsaw has delivered a total of 90 electric generators to Kyiv. This was announced by the mayor of the Polish capital, Rafał Trzaskowski. According to his statement, among the devices transferred are both compact generators and powerful industrial units, which are capable of providing electricity to hospitals, critical life support facilities, and the social services sector. Generators were purchased with the involvement of Warsaw's municipal companies, and transport was arranged with Polish services. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Strength to Ukrainian defenders, men and women. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you. Subscribe, give us a like, comment, share, and we'll see you next time.